This is Angel Insights, brought to you by SyndicateRoom, the show that delves inside the world of angel investing to discover their tactics, tips, and approach to investing in startups. And I'm so thrilled to say that joining me today is Paul Dowling, founder and CEO at Dreamstake, which is a major funding platform for tech startups. Their vision is to democratise the whole tech startup process by harnessing the web to link entrepreneurs with the support and funding they need. Dreamstake provides startup education through the free Dreamstake Academy and funding through syndication on the platform. They are advocates of the lean startup methodology and believe in supporting startups as they go through the various stages of funding and life cycle. Dreamstake support funding up to $2 million, and if that wasn't enough, Paul is also the co-founder at Hoxtech Angels, an investment club for tech startups that we discuss in much greater length in today's interview. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Paul Dowling, founder and CEO at Dreamstake. Paul, welcome to Angel Insights. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Can you start us off by giving us a bit of background about you and tell us how you made your entry into the tech world?
Okay, I usually describe myself as a salesman come management consultant come entrepreneur. I've actually been involved in tech really more or less from when I started work, so it's at least 25 years. It came about really because I was brought up in the Thames Valley, which was really the sort of Silicon Valley for larger American companies coming to the UK. That was, yes, it's too long ago to think about, but during the 1980s, that's correct.
And so tell me, what's the origin story then for Dreamstake? How did that Thames Valley start lead to where you are today?
Well, by that time, I'd kind of moved around the world a little bit. I'd had a stint for Daimler-Benz in Germany, and I'd been up to the Midlands in the UK. And again, as I said, I'd been involved in tech right from the beginning. So what I really wanted to do was to give entrepreneurs outside of Silicon Valley access to the same ecosystem as they had in the Valley. And I felt that technology was the way to do this.
And so can you give us kind of the summary of Dreamstake, what you do, your ethos, and how the value you provide?
Yes, well, I'm a great admirer of Y Combinator, Angel Lists, Kickstarter, and all of these initiatives that are democratizing access to capital and helping startups get off the ground. And I looked at those, and I wanted to provide something that was more tuned towards the European ecosystem, where the startups at the time were far less mature and needed a lot of kind of careful handling. Mm-hmm. So the idea behind Dreamstake was to sort of combined the ideas behind Y Combinator, i.e. the support and mentoring, and the ideas behind Angel List, which is more about funding.
Mm-hmm. So your main strength is matching funding to startups with investors. So when you meet a founder first, what's your line of questioning? What do you look for in that first meeting that shows they have the potential to be a successful and investable company?
Well, I'd go back a step because we're the only platform, I think, in the world that uses an algorithm to do the heavy lifting around this whole topic. So the startup founder will join the platform, and we use algorithms to rate the startups. And it's only when they hit certain limits or certain ratings that we decide to talk to them. And then we use very similar criteria to those used by VCs. I personally like the idea of founder market fit. Mm-hmm. So at early stage, really, it's all about identifying a really strong founder and matching them with a very, very strong and growing market.
Interesting topic where some people say you need deep market expertise to really know the market well and dominate, and others say that naivety can actually generate more beneficial outcomes because you're not aware of the pitfalls that can entail. Which side do you fall on in that respect?
Probably the latter, but maybe not for that reason. I think that strong founders are it's because of their execution skills. They tend to be very tenacious people. A lot of the same skills as a salesman in many ways. They don't give up quickly at all. And if you match them against a strong market, they're gonna learn about that market pretty quickly. And so sometimes, yes, naivety is a good thing. I mean, certainly in my case, I knew nothing about funding at all, and it certainly makes me think differently about the way to address the market. And I probably wouldn't have done it if I'd known what I know now, sort of thing.
And you mentioned the algorithm there. Do you think we'll see more algorithmic deal sourcing in the future? I know Google Ventures tried to adopt it with some difficulty with the partners being unhappy about it. But what's your take on that? Will we see more automated deal sourcing?
I would say absolutely, definitely. I mean, because human picking of startups isn't that great, and therefore codifying a lot of that is relatively easy. Of course, if you did it to perfection, you'd have something a little bit like the holy grail of software, because you'd be able to back on all the winners. But yeah, to try and get the same sort of success rate as human picking at early stage is probably not the most difficult thing in the world to achieve.
And then when determining the potential success of a startup, for you personally, so obviously a personal choice here, what's the major metric you look at? Is it month-on-month growth? Is it traction? Is it whatever it may be? What's your one that determines for you whether something's an exciting proposition?
Well, I'm always matching it against lean, the lean startup milestones of problem solution and product market fit. And really, to answer your question, it depends a little bit about which one of those they're trying to achieve and what type of funding they're looking for. So if they're looking for a very early stage angel investment, there certainly are no revenues, and therefore you're looking really at whether they've proved that there is a real problem and other people agree that there's a real problem and are starting to use the product. Later on, it's the metrics start to move towards, I guess, how many users you've got, and then how many of those users are prepared to pay for the service. But certainly, I mean, up to VC level, that's kind of all you've got to deal with.
And another question that's always debated at this stage is how much should a startup actually raise? So how do you approach that at Dreamstake?
Again, I'm using really lean startup as my, I guess, as the way of defining that, and it's those milestones that are so important, and so really it's often the amount that the founder needs to hit the next milestone, so I think that one of the things that startup founders need to do at the moment in the current UK environment is avoid falling into a gap, and a gap really probably is it's worth between 500 and 1 million. So what's happening at the moment is that founders are taking the easy money up to 150k. They're burning through it without making themselves ready for VC funding, and they're looking for another funding round between 500 and let's say 800 or 1 million, and they're not VC ready. Now, this is quite difficult to fill around like that, because you have to pull together a hell of a lot of angels.
Mm-hmm. And have you seen an explosion of this kind of bridge round?
There's an explosion of people wanting to fill this bridge round. I would say that, in fact, the majority of people have fallen into this gap at the moment. So there's a whole load of startups looking for around about 500,000. And some of them are getting it, but it's quite hard work.
And I'd love to, you mentioned there the UK tech scene. I'd love to discuss the UK tech scene. What are your thoughts on where we're at the moment, where we could improve, and how you generally think the funding and tech environment is?
I mean, I think first of all, the UK is a great place to set up a startup, and I think we have to give credit to the government for a lot of that, because they put in place the right incentives, and they've done a great job of banging the drum for London, let's say. It's pretty good news. I think in the past we've also been rather guilty of the ecosystem players making more noise than the actual startups themselves. And I think that you can really call that hype. But I think the hype is turning into reality. The startups are now starting to emerge, and you can identify them. So I think that what we've got to be cautious of now is not being sucked in by the bubble that's likely to happen in Silicon Valley at late stage. So I think the bubble's going to occur with late stage Silicon Valley startups being unable to exit, and this is likely to trickle down into other markets unless we're very cautious about it.
Do you think it's already happening with HelloFresh and Deezer pulling their recent IPO?
Yeah, I think that. I mean, there are signs of that. I mean, I think we're a long way from a bubble in Europe. In fact, more or less the opposite. But I'm old enough to remember the last .com bubble, and the problem was there is that once a bubble bursts in the US, it hits startups on a global basis.
Absolutely. And can you share your vision then for how the startup funding scene will develop then over the next few years?
Yes, so I think there's going to be a lot more of this democratisation of capital, and I think that VCs in Silicon Valley have had a good time of it, but in a way they're rather hypocritical. I mean, the idea that they say they only invest in startups that are an hour's drive from their office is kind of the opposite to what they're saying to the startups about creating big global scalable businesses. And the market's going to be opened up by platforms. I mean, we all know that platforms change everything. We've got Uber, Airbnb, etc. But the investment world isn't immune from that. And of course, platforms are going to change the investment marketplace. And so we're going to see more angel syndication on platforms like Dreamstake, and I have to credit our competitor AngelList for identifying that in the future large institutional investors who haven't been able to invest in startups due to the transaction costs will be able to use platforms such as AngelList and Dreamstake to invest in portfolios of startups. And so I think the market is going to change massively.
And you mentioned that VCs only investing in startups that are an hour away from their house or so. What's your take then on proximity to the startups you invest in? Do you think that investors need to be very close by to add real value?
I think it's got to change. I mean, I think it's a bad thing. I mean, if you think about it, really, although I'm a great admirer of Silicon Valley, what Silicon Valley did was it pulled in resources from across the world into a single location, which is very inefficient and also very unfair. Now, as clusters opened across the world in London, New York, Tel Aviv, etc., at least that spread it out a little bit. Now I think the cluster is around accelerators and accelerators net. So now, for the first time in history, a guy in Nairobi can create a hot startup, say in payments, and can be supported by an accelerator. And I think it's going to go even further. In the end, the platforms are going to act as the accelerators, and therefore, anybody anywhere will have access to capital and support. But that's a long-term vision.
And I'd love to chat a little about Hoxtech Angels now. So can you tell us a bit about that, what the mission is there, and why should angels come and see for themselves?
Well, the reason we created Hoxtech Angels was that investors need a lot of reassurance. They're a bit more traditional than the startup founders. They don't want to be bombarded at Google campus by entrepreneurs who are looking for their money. So they need a little bit more of a closed, curated environment. And so we set up Hoxtech Angels really to give them a safe environment to invest, to meet in other investors, and to be absolutely sure that they were going to meet the best startups. And I think our next Hoxtech Angels is on January the 22nd. We're always looking for great tech angels, and even those of angels that are not tech angels, we'd like to provide an environment where they can invest alongside tech angels.
Do you have any kind of specialisation in terms of sector of companies being displayed? Is it all consumer IT, or is it a wide variant?
Our definition really of the sector we're interested in is a high growth potential, low capital intensive startup. Now that generally means internet. Of course, we're really a microcosm of the overall market, and therefore we're seeing more and more fintech in London, more and more fashion tech, or fash tech as it's called, but we just really go with what is coming through on the platform, and we can to some degree skew that by running contests and running events around particular themes.
And if it's okay with you, we're going to dive into a quick fire round now.
Of course.
So your favourite book and why?
I think War and Peace, and mainly because it's full of drama.
If you could give founders one piece of advice, what would it be?
Execution is everything, so an idea is not enough.
Favourite startup or investing blog?
I'm a great fan of Mattermark. Now that's fudging the question slightly because Mattermark is full of other people's blogs, but I think Mattermark is a great source of information.
Absolutely. And then the founder you most respect or admire?
I think that's changed slightly from Mark Zuckerberg to Elon Musk. I think the reason it's changed is because I used to believe it was all about a single focus on a single startup, but I'm beginning to think that it's amazing to be able to kind of tackle a whole range of world problems.
Mm-hmm. And do you think Jack Dorsey's got what it takes to be CEO of 2 IPO'd companies?
Well, I think that's a tough one. I think probably two's the wrong number. Maybe it's good to be looking at a whole bunch or at one. But I think being very hands-on on a couple is tough.
The biggest challenge facing London's tech ecosystem?
I think that's to keep our feet on the ground and not get sucked into the Silicon Valley bubble.
And then finally, the Dreamstake funded company you're most excited about and why?
I won't pick a single startup because I think it's the wrong thing to do at this stage.
Is it like picking one of your children?
It's a little bit like picking one of your children.
I hear that a lot.
It's also highly dangerous because it's. I always say to people, I can fill a room with 20 startups easier than I can find one because it's a portfolio approach at this stage, and I think it's the only approach because if you bet on one, you'll lose your money. That's pretty sure.
Okay, so have a diverse basket.
Yeah, build a diverse basket as quickly as you possibly can.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I've hugely enjoyed chatting with you. It's been absolutely fantastic.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Again, a huge thank you to Paul for giving up his time today to be on the show. And if you can't get enough of Angel Insights, then you can follow us on Twitter at SyndicateRoom, or you can upvote our episode on the Product Hunt podcast section. And we'd also like to remind you that startup investing is risky, therefore it is important that you engage in the proper due diligence prior to making the investments. Thank you so much, as always, for your continued support, and we look so forward to seeing you in next week's episode.